Gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe, here in this great hall of justice, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled.
I'm Batman.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
Dooby-dooby-doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Wonder Woman! Wonder Woman!
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
I'm Conor MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod. I was born in 1518 in the village of Glenfinnan on the shores of Loch Shiel. Now I am immortal.
I'm Captain Kirk.
I'm a doctor. But probably not the one you expect.
Welcome everyone to another presentation from Geek This Week, another panel from the 2016 Fanboy Expo in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's time to find out what the savior of the universe has to say. That's right, this is the Sam J. Jones panel, Flash Gordon himself, talking about his career, the movie, and Ted. So please sit back and enjoy the Sam Jones panel from 2016 Fanboy Expo in Knoxville, Tennessee.
I found out, so a couple of the staff drove me out there. We just Googled, this was on Friday morning before the event started here. So they drove me out to, we Googled Cash Road, and we found, and as soon as we hit the intersection of Cash Road and Asheville Highway, I said, this is it. And I remember this as an 8-year-old boy. It's crazy. So we made that turn down Cash Road, and it was probably about the 12th house on the right, because I remember I had pig farmers on my left, and then I had these other neighbors on my right. But I remembered vividly that there was the house, and we found some lady out there with her dogs, and she told me all about the history. But what was fascinating is nothing had changed at all, because the neighbor had bought all the land, so and that prevented all the developers from coming in. But what was surreal was I remember, I think the last thing I did before I moved away, we would have target practice out in our backyard, which was 1,000 acres of woods and whatnot. As I arrived Friday morning, 53 years later, the neighbors were having target practice. I mean, it was wild. I mean, all you hear is the rifles beyond the tree line right there where they're all having target practice. And I thought, this is really cool. And anyway, so I just wanted to share that with you. And also why it was significant, because that was 1963, and that's when JFK was assassinated. And because I remember, I didn't understand that as 8 years old, but I remember my mother being very upset. So as a youngster, things that happen, it affects you, whether it's good or bad, it affects you. And it also, I guess it can either shut it down or make it vibrant and vivid. But it was just wonderful. I mean, if you asked me what I had to eat last week in Houston, I couldn't tell you. I completely forgot. But you asked me, what happened 53 years ago, in Knoxville as an 8-year-old, I can tell you everything. It's wild. I just want to share that with you. So go ahead.
Okay, so Flash Gordon is an iconic cult classic that is known by my 70-year-old mom and my 11-year-old nephew. Did you ever see it become the cult classic it has become?
Well, I mean, over the years, it obviously evolved into that. It's an absolute blessing that it did. But when you, as a young actor, sort of very naive, number one, it's a blessing to work, to actually be hired. And then it's icing on the cake. It's a bigger blessing if the project you do ends up becoming successful. But you know, Flash Gordon in the beginning, the movie itself was very controversial. It actually became a big hit in a lot of countries. But in America, when it was released, it really didn't become a big hit at all. Not until it went to VHS. Who remembers VHS? You know? It became top 10 VHS, you know? I guess that cassette was $80 or something, right? What was it, $80 for a cassette, you know? But yeah, so I mean, I ended up, so that was 1979, and went on to do, obviously, I had a lot of favor representing Flash Gordon and a superhero, and I know that it complemented or it catapulted me into doing other movies. So I went on to do 53 other films, but primarily a lot more television shows. But it's been wonderful. And I kind of feel, you know, I was a Marine before I was an actor, so I kind of feel I'm a little bit like Flash Gordon anyway. The fact that he, you know, he's one of the few superheroes who he doesn't have any superpowers. He relies on his wit and his athleticism. A lot of times my wife tells me that I forget about the wit and I just rely on my athleticism. But yeah, so there are similarities between both. There are, you know. Yes, sir.
Regarding your character on Stargate SG-1, he was a great character, Eris Spock, if I remember right. And what, did they give you any indication that he would be brought back at some time? Because it just kind of left that thread hanging. Yeah,
SG-1, yeah, it was a great character. It was the bounty hunter on SG-1. I believe it was called Dead Man's Switch. No, they don't. I mean, if you do a movie, you've got multiple bosses to please, and they have somebody that they have to please as well. So let's just say SG-1. You know, it did very well. I know that character and that episode complemented the entire series, but for some reason, you know, you could punish yourself and say, well, I wish I did a better job, but it doesn't come down to you. I mean, unless you are a problem, you know, on the set. But if you know you're not a problem, it comes down to network executives. Maybe they have a deal with somebody else. Maybe they promised another actor, and you know, well, why don't we pick up Sam's character? You know, he played Eris Bach in Dead Man's Switch. We really like what he did, and half of them say, yeah, let's do that. And then somebody else, maybe a little bit senior level leadership, he says, well, so they're constantly bargaining back and forth. So I'm glad I'm not part of it. You know, I think as actors we're probably used as pawns, but the business is what it is. You know, I'm thankful to be hired, and if the project is picked up or if it's a big box office success at the movie theater, then it's a bigger blessing. But usually you do your job, you keep your mouth shut, you pray. You know, you pray, you ask for God's blessings on it. And you just don't, you know, you don't over brainstorm it. You know, you don't brainstorm it. It is what it is. We can't over brainstorm anything if we don't have control over it. Right. We give it to God and say, hey, here it is. You know, here it is, man. You take it from here. Yeah, I mean, I used to over brainstorm anything, and all that led was self-punishment. Okay. And I can't stand that pending mode anyway. If I'm up for a project, or if I'm waiting for the project to be picked up, I want to hear yes or no. I don't want to hear, okay, let's drag him along for a couple more weeks or months. I don't like that. I don't like it. I'd rather hear no, absolutely not, than to be dragged on through weeks or months of not knowing.
It's hard, that uncertainty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, you don't need a microphone, David. Come on.
On the since he brought up Eris Bach and SG-1, I've heard that the backstage or behind the scenes when the actors and everything were filming the SG-1 series.
Yeah.
I saw interviews with some of the other cast members where they talked about how it was very unlike making other movies, that there was a lot of antics that went on and they just had a good time, and there was a lot of practical joke making. I'm wondering, while you were there, did they do any practical jokes on you, or get you into something like that?
I actually, it's a great question. It happens a lot. But what happened to me on that, I actually, as an actor, I think I was in this was what year, 2000, right? So that would have been 16 years ago. So I would have been, whatever the math is, 40, probably late 40s, mid 40s, I think, right? So I learned a big lesson as an actor. I love to improvise, I love to ad lib, but on that show, if you're a lead actor and it's your show, you can do whatever you want to do. They sort of have their own rhythms and beats and language, vernacular, especially when it comes to the names of the characters. And so that sort of hindered me. It wasn't their fault, it's my own fault. But I also learned a big lesson about memorization, knowing your lines. I mean, as an actor, we pride ourselves on really, being prepared. You show up, you get rest the night before, you show up on set, you better know your lines, because the one thing you don't want to do as an actor, you don't want to hold up production, because that costs money. So I hit one of those walls, man, where, and I learned my lines in the old days, not anymore, by blocking. So if I'm sitting here talking to you right now, and all these words are memorized right now, and then all of a sudden, and because I memorized, because I knew I would be sitting here the entire time, so when my brain tells me, okay, I'm sitting here, so the line's going to come because I rehearsed it this way. Well, that's really a kind of closing yourself out, sort of a closed door methodology. You want to be free, you want to be outside the box. So what I did, I memorized all my lines, and I got on the set, especially that exterior scene, we were outdoors, and the director said, okay, good. Now for this take, Sam, I want you to grab the weapon, put it down, walk over by the tree, pick up that object over there, come back around here, cross behind camera, walk over to the other tree. I said, yeah, no problem. So I started walking and moving my body in other places that I had not rehearsed my lines. I was dead. I didn't know any of my lines, okay? And it became a nightmare. So, usually it takes somebody making you laugh, but when they made me laugh, I was just like, where am I? And so I learned a big lesson, and I talked with the director, and finally I got through it. But when you're doing take 12 or take 15, it's not a good sign. It's like after a while, it's not funny anymore. It's like, okay, Sam, you want to take a break? So anyway, I talked to the director afterwards, and he said, Sam, he goes, this is where you have to humble yourself. You gotta be a good listener. I don't care if it's making movies or whatever your vocation is. He said, Sam, you should be so good with your lines, your dialogue, that if I decide to hang you upside down from a tree and throw little tiny pebbles at your face while you're talking, you should still know your lines. I said, you're right. I mean, how do you argue with that? So from that point on, 16 years ago, yeah, I mean, I memorized my lines. You wouldn't believe it, in the car, driving, screaming at the top of my lungs, memorizing it, crying, laughing, grabbing a stranger off the street, hey, run lines with me, whatever, anything, anywhere, with my dog at home, anything, just to make it different. Anyway, but that took me a lot of years to figure that one out.
But you never tried the upside down with the pebble throwing, right?
Yeah, but just think about that distraction. You're trying to talk it, doesn't matter. Wait a minute, hold it. If you really got it down and you know what you're doing as a professional, it doesn't matter. I mean, look at all the politicians and VIPs in the world who speak all the time. They have distractions. I mean, some use what's it called? Teleprompters. Which is kind of challenging, I guess, but. Yeah, I mean, you got to go with it. And that's the point. You see, my point was, before it wouldn't have mattered on any other show, I could have improvised and ad-libbed. I would have never stopped myself. But here I was just dumbfounded, because they didn't want me improvising. They didn't want me ad-libbing.
Definitely a different, they're married to the exact script versus they have more of a free flow.
There you go.
My question for you, sir. How did it come about you getting the role in Ted?
Oh, it's funny. Yeah, Seth MacFarlane called me, I think, in 2010. And he said, this is Seth MacFarlane. I said, who are you? No, I don't know who it was. And he said, hey, listen, man. He said, when I was 8 years old, and by the way, I'm getting these calls now. Is there any water here? It doesn't matter. I could probably improvise and fake it through. It's okay if it's not. I was eating a piece of popcorn before I came. He called me. He said, hey, when I was 8 years old, I saw your movie, and it really, thank you so much. And it really, hold on. It really impacted my life. I said, what do you mean it impacted your life? He said, well, as an 8-year-old boy, when I walked out of that movie theater and having you fresh in my mind as Flash Gordon and all that, I knew for a fact I was going to be a creative type person. I said, well, Seth, I said, you became creative. You also became a little perverted there, buddy, didn't you? Huh? And he said, yeah, I did. But he said, look, I'm doing this movie about this cute little teddy bear. Well, we all know how that cute little teddy bear ended up. So, yeah, I signed for all 3 movies. I did Ted, and then I signed for Ted 2 and Ted 3. And it was great. I mean, it sort of catapulted. It actually opened up a brand new, on my fan base, it opened up a brand new age demographic, you know, especially for the teenagers to their early 20s or so. So it's kind of cool. You know, I get families that come up to my table. I got granddad, son, grandson, right? I got grandma, daughter, granddaughter, you know, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
But that's what Ted did. It sort of resurrected Flash Gordon. And I have these new fans, this younger crowd. It's wonderful.
When I first saw the movie, I totally marked out. I'm watching it in the bed with my wife. She's laughing at me while I'm laughing at the movie. And like I had told you earlier, that scene with Mark Wahlberg, I told her, if that happened to me, honey, I'm leaving you. I'm going. Sorry.
You're going to go to the party.
Yeah, I told her I'd come and get her.
Well, you got to see, that's the thing. You got to, if the wife says no, you got to do it, man. I mean, you know, maybe invite her to the party, you know?
But it's Flash Gordon. You got to go.
You got to go. Yeah, he got in big trouble too, didn't he?
Yeah.
He got in huge trouble. Yeah. Next question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Who's next? Oh, yes, sir.
Maybe think back a couple years. When you did the movie, Ming the Merciless, can you tell us how you got along with him or anything about him?
Yeah, Max von Sydow. Yeah, great guy, man. I looked at him as a mentor. He taught me a lesson also. Remember, I'm 24 years old. We're in England, 1979, and you know, it's a whole time process. It's time consuming making a movie, especially a big budget movie. And in 1979, this movie cost $35 million. That is huge. Now, by today's standards, it's probably $250 million film if you do the math, you know, inflation and whatnot. So we're doing this big movie, and they shot his close-up. Now they're going to change cameras around and do my close-up. Well, that could take 2 hours. It could take 4 hours. It could take an hour because you got to change the lighting. Boom, boom, boom. So I told Max, because I found out that his wardrobe. So he's supposed to give me he stands next to camera, or behind camera, and he feeds me his dialogue, his lines to me, while the camera's doing me. So I told Max, I said, Max, you don't have to do this, man. I know that costume weighs a ton. You can just go relax and take a nap or something. And he looked at me and he said, absolutely not, Sam. I will do your off-camera lines for you, and I expect the exact same thing from you. And you know what? They were prophetic words, because I felt he's been a little bit, aggressive, abrasive, but I got it because, that same year I went to do another movie, and years later, especially not so much recently, but yeah, over the years, many, many times, big name actors will not stick around. And if they do stick around, they're going to play some crazy antics on you or jokes, and they're going to make you lose concentration. I'd rather just stare at the wall, But he was right. He was very prophetic. what he was basically saying, no, this is part of being a professional. I don't care, they're paying you, you're there to work, and if they've already done your close-up, it doesn't mean you're done. It means now they're putting the camera on the other actor, and you better stick around and help him or her, compliment, bring out a better performance. And it's funny. I mean, a lot of actors don't do that. They just don't show up. They're gone. They're on their cell phone in the corner, or they're gone. And the second thing he taught me, but it took, I learned that immediately, but he gave me some other advice which took me probably 30 years to figure out. Not 30 years, but probably 20. But he said, hey Sam, I've been watching you during the lunch hour for the past month. We were in England for about, 5.5 months. He said, I've been watching you at lunchtime and you've been paying for everybody's lunch. He said, I encourage you to save your money. I said, thank you, Max, I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you. And sure enough, I mean, he was prophetic again. I mean, if you don't save your money, you're not saving your money, okay? It goes, especially if everybody expects you to pay for everything. So, I mean, just a wonderful guy. And look at him, he's 90, right? And he's still working. And so he really inspires me now, really. Not just the early advice, but even now. I mean, I'll be 62 this year. I look at him, I look at William Shatner, who's 83, and I don't know if, I felt I got in a dream, maybe it was a dream, a vision. I really felt that God spoke to me many years ago in my 30s, and because I was going through a tough time of, I was too old to play 20s, too young to look, mid-30s, late, I was at that weird age, but I really felt that it was very clear to me when I hit 35 years old that when I reached my 60s, 70s, and 80s, that I was going to work a lot in the movie business. And I believe that, I really do. It's not a matter, it's just a matter of, it doesn't matter what age you are, especially if you know you belong there, if you know that God has sort of blessed what you're doing, doesn't matter what anybody else says, then by golly, they need 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old actors. Come on!
Kind of going off the first lesson that you talked about learning from him, you talked about being there for the other actors so they can work off of your body language, your facial cues, things like that, the tone of voice, things like that. Have you done voice acting where you're in a booth with someone else?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we do a lot of voice. If we're not just, I have done voice for a couple of, what were the early projects, not the cartoons, but the, what's gaming now? It's all these Xbox stuff. But in the early years, I did something like that. But even if they're not just using our voice for voice as a voiceover actor, we're always in the ADR room because a lot of times your voice, there's a lot of mistakes on what they shoot with you right there in the film. So you got to go back at the end of the movie and you got to loop that. In other words, you got to look at the screen, you got to look at yourself. You got headphones on, and it's beep, 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 beep. And on the fourth beep, you got to match your lips that are moving. You got to sync. It's the same dialogue, but now you got to correct the mistakes that the sound man made. And my claim to fame in Hollywood is I went to Taiwan. I shot a movie in Taiwan. And it was usually when I traveled the world doing lower budget movies. I did quite a few lower budget movies, but they paid really well back then. It's usually a skeleton crew, not a whole lot of people. And I'm looking around and I realized after, and I said, oh, they're not miking me up. They usually give you a little microphone here. Oh, you see a guy holding a big boom, with a big microphone. And on day 2, I'm thinking, well, maybe this is just rehearsal. No, but they're rolling camera. And I realized, wait a minute, they're going to shoot a movie with me for 7 weeks in Taiwan, and they're not shooting sound. They're not shooting sound. So when I got back, they sent the movie in the can back to Hollywood, and I went into a recording studio. I guess I held the record. I looped or synced an entire movie with a lot of dialogue in 10 hours. They said that takes days and a week sometimes to do that. So I did that in 10 hours. But it's challenging to sit there and look at yourself and your lips are moving, and now you got to beep, 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 and then, or maybe you took the breath in too early, and now you're trying to catch up, and you're hearing yourself talk. So after a while, I would just hear beep, 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 and I'd have to take because it's weird to be speaking and then listening to yourself speak while you're watching yourself. So I would hear beep, 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 and then I'd lose the headphones and do it. It worked out good.
That's awesome. I'm very impressed. That's not easy.
I appreciate you talking about Flash Gordon. That great movie completely influenced my life. I wanted to ask about two questions. Maybe other projects that you've done that were your favorite. And another one, do people confuse you with the Sam Jones from the Ted movies in like real life and want you to engage in activities such as that? Does that ever become a problem?
You mean, do they confuse me with?
Because you're obviously not the same.
I'm sorry.
You're obviously not the same fellow from the movie as far as.
Well, no, it's a great point that you're bringing up, because when I finally read the script and I said, "Hey, Seth, now you've hired me to sort of play myself, do a parody, do a spoof, make fun of me," but I said, "You do understand?" Now that I read the script, I said, "Yeah, I mean, believe me, I partied, as a youngster." I said, but this is just pieces of me. This is not really me. And so it's just weird doing that anyway. And then I told myself, look, I still have a very strong Flash Gordon fan base. And Flash Gordon is, he's sort of a guy, he's a guy with moral integrity. And so we kind of bumped heads a little bit. And I'll tell you what happened. This is answered prayer. This actually happened. Remember, it's my first big movie in many, many years. I did a lot of movies, but it's my first big, huge Hollywood movie with big names. And maybe first time, 7, 8 years. So it was originally, he gave me a rewrite. He gave me a 3-page monologue. And this monologue, this speech consisted of 3 pages. That's a lot of words, guys. And the concept, the theme was Flash Gordon was telling the party people, preaching to them on the how good it is, the advantages of doing all types of narcotics and alcohol and drugs. That's what it was. It was basically being a spokesperson for heavy narcotics and drugs. And I said, Seth, I cannot do this. I understand your jokes, okay, fine. But I cannot, Flash Gordon can't sit there and, preach to the party people, just long monologue about all the benefits, the positive benefits of doing cocaine and you name it. All this big list that he had. And he said, well, I talked to Universal Studios and they said, take it or leave it. All right? Now this is before we started shooting, right? We're a couple days from shooting. And so what's the first thing that a good husband does? He goes to his wife, okay? That's the first thing you do. Okay, you newlyweds or you've been around for a while. I said, honey, we've been praying for, big comeback in the movie business. I said, at least with good quality movies, which is a double entendre right there if you think about it, right? And I said, and the studio said, take it or leave it. And she said, we're going to pray about this. And when we were done, it was not as though we went into the closet. We just prayed, gave it to God. And she said to me, and it's not as though we heard anything specific, but she said to me, you tell me you're going to do it, but I'm telling you right now, honey, she said, it's not going to happen. Not by our power, but it will not happen. I said, are you sure? Okay. She said, no, just tell him you're going to do it. I said, okay. So I called Seth back. I said, okay, I'm good to go. And we showed up 2 days later to shoot it. And Seth came running up to me with this startled look on his face, waving the pages in his hand. He said, you're not going to believe it. I said, yes, I am. He said, Universal just called, and they've eliminated that entire scene, the 3-page monologue. And I wanted to say, and this is really a test of your faith, I wanted to say, well, what happened? What really happened? But no, you don't ask that question. Prayer was answered. So, even though I did, it's wonderful. It is. But even though I did the little thing like that in the movie and all that kind of stuff, maybe chug some iced tea, which represented whatever it was, I think tequila or rum. It's okay, I don't have an issue with that, you know. But anyway, it was cool. That was a long answer for your question, wasn't it? Did I answer? I do like to give some long answers, but did that answer? Who asked that question? Yeah. Did I address the specifics of your question? Yes. Okay.
He looks pretty satisfied. He's got a good smile on there. Well, Mr. Sam, I believe we've run out of time.
Well, let's do a couple. Well, I thought I had a couple. Let's do a couple more. Let's do a couple more because I don't want to. Yeah. Why is somebody else coming on?
We do. We have somebody else coming, but
are they here now?
About 3 minutes.
Okay,
making
go ahead.
Flash Gordon, how much do you interact with like Queen for the soundtrack?
You know, usually I did not, and usually you don't, because you do the movie as the actor, and then when it's finished, the musicians, they'll come into a recording studio, the same kind I was talking about before, and they'll look at the film, and sometimes they'll look at it without any dialogue, or they'll listen to it, and then they just start creating. They just start creating by the visuals and by the dialogue. But I did not get to meet them, unfortunately. At least I don't remember meeting them. I worked really hard, and there were just a couple. You know, as a 24-year-old, I think they invited me out to a nightclub a couple of times. I went out, and everybody else was there at the nightclub. Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, Bianca Jagger, John Conte, if you're any old boxing fans, he was an English champion. I'm just a lot of who's who in the late 70s, you know. I could have met Queen. I mean, but one of those foggy nights, I only had a couple of them, you know, after a couple of foggy nights. And I think that's when I quit my heavy partying. It's probably right about that time because, you know, you have to make a decision. Am I going to party all night and show up on the set looking like doo-doo? And, you know, anyway, so you can't really mix the two. I know a lot of people try, but Hollywood nowadays, they don't really care who you are. They don't really put up with any nonsense, you know. You either bring value to the project or you don't. There's no real gray area. So all those crazy party guys, yeah, they don't put up with them anymore. Come on, any more? Yes.
I was wondering about how for you was the physicality of the role of Flash Gordon, like when you're doing that duel with the Brent's pretty famous scene.
On the rotating disc?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. I had a lot of falls because at its highest peak, elevated about 30 feet. So, you know, they had, it was funny, so I'm looking down while I'm rehearsing and there's boxes stacked up. You know, these gigantic boxes are layered and offset and they're stacked up. They're probably about 10 feet high, you know, boxes. I looked at the English, because I looked at the English stunt coordinator. I said, there's boxes down there. I don't see any airbags or any big foam things. He goes, no, you're going to fall in the boxes when you fall. I said, what do you mean I'm going to fall in the boxes? He goes, trust me, man. So, you know, and you're fighting. You don't want to be, you know, you want to get into the scene. And I fell probably 10 times, you know, not on purpose. And sure enough, the first time I fell, man, your body hits the boxes, it hits the edge, and for a second there you go, oh, that's an edge, you know? And then all of a sudden your body sinks and it molds, it forms a perfect mold of your body. So it doesn't really hurt you. But when you first make contact, it's like, ugh, you know? It's like somebody taking the corner of a box, you know? But it worked, and really no injuries there. The thing that I was concerned about in the rocket ship when I was crashing into where Ming was, then they had some real fire in front of my face that was, and they told me just to stay there as long as you can. And that fire kept, I guess somebody hit the valve, you know, the gas valve, and all of a sudden I started smelling the hair on my arms burning. And I said, I think it's time to go. You know? Yeah, I mean, I never did my own big style. I always did my own fight scenes. Never really, you know, I never did any fire gags or high falls or that kind of stuff. I did get hurt. But on Ted, who saw Ted 2? Yeah, they put that wire on me and they did a snap. I forget the exact name. But they, you know, when the stunt lady came and did the flips and then she kicked me backwards. And they actually put a cable, they put a harness on me and a cable, and they snapped me 5 times. I mean, it's a snap and a jerk, and your body is jerked. And that was kind of cool. I actually got hurt. I got a paper cut, if you could believe that. So I got a paper cut that just sliced up my whole arm. It was ridiculous. But yeah, so I've been real fortunate over the years not to get any major, just a lot of bumps and bruises. However, I know we're going over this is it. However, on Ted, remember when the Asian guy took the knife through the hole? I punched a hole in the wall, and he stuck the knife through there. Remember that? You remember that scene? Was it Ted or Ted 2? I get it mixed up.
Ted.
It was Ted at the party scene. Remember?
Yeah.
So I started to improvise again, and improvising. Is he here? Is he ready to go? Okay, I'm going to wrap it up right now. So I told you before, I love to improvise. So all of a sudden, it just occurred to me, the first time I saw him bring the knife out, I'm supposed to grab his hand and grab his wrist and bite his hand. And it occurred to me, I'm just going to kick his hand. And I did a front snap kick, and I tore my spinositis, whatever's next to the hamstring. I snapped that puppy. Before my fight action scene, right, with everybody at the party. So they had to use a stunt double for me to do that fight scene. I was very upset with myself. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. All right, thank you. I'll see you at my table, guys, all right? I'll be here till 5 o'clock. Well, that sounds better. Hey, can we do this over? I like that better.
Everybody give up a big hand for Mr. Sam Joe.
Thank you. Sorry for